Hi, what we're going to do today is we're going to do this exploding cube with all the reflections and a reflection of maybe you in it. And you're going to be able to do that in about a couple of hours from scratch using Blender. And the first thing you need to do is get Blender from blender.org. Blender is a free open source 3D content creation suite, as it says, and it's for all major operating systems including Apple, Mac, including Linux, all the flavours of Linux. It's free, so go and get it, then come back here. Right, we've done that, and let's open Blender up. Now you see the first thing you have is a splash screen with some links at the bottom left, very useful, and at the bottom right of the splash screen you've got a whole bunch of files. If you've already used it, it'll show you your last 5 files there, and a recover last session button. But we click outside it and it disappears. And what we've got is Blender's default screen with a camera, a light and a cube. Now, as you've seen, I'm selecting things. Now the way you select things is to click on them with your right mouse button, or alternatively in the list at the top right, which contains all of the things that are in the scene, you can click with your left mouse button and it'll select them up there. And that's quite useful if you've got one thing hidden behind another and you know what it's called, then you can use the list to select it and you don't have to swivel around all over the place. Now, the next thing to look at is multiple selections, because sometimes you want more than one thing selected, and the way you do that is by holding down the shift key. You click one thing, then the next, then the next. And if you want to change the order, because it's sometimes important to have the last thing selected to be a specific item, then you can just click it again with the shift key and it changes the order like that. Okay, have a go. Pause the video, go and have a go at selecting things using the list and using your mouse. Then come back here. Good, you're back. Now you may have noticed that we haven't moved anything about. Well, one step at a time. And the first thing to do is to notice that if you put your mouse in the bottom of the screen, centrally, press down the middle button and move it from left to right, you'll find that the whole scene rotates around like this. It's moving it left to right and back again, and you can move it up and down, and it rotates in the other direction. And that basically is one of the main ways that you navigate around a scene in Blender. One of the things I should say also is if you press the scroll, if you have a wheel mouse and you use that, then it zooms in and out when you rotate the wheel, which is very useful. Right, now there's 2 more things in Blender, and they're not rendered when the scene is actually rendered. One is that grid that you can see, and where the green and the red line cross is where the 0 point is. And you can use the views menu at the bottom left if you want to see things from precisely the front, precisely the bottom and so on, and most importantly from the camera view. There you go. And we can render that, and what we get is a very uninspiring sort of grey thing, but that can soon be changed. So if you hit Show Hide Render View from the same menu, get back to what they call the 3D view, which is the default view, and we'll talk a little bit also about the 3D cursor. Now, the 3D cursor is this sort of peculiar thing you can see there at the bottom of the screen. It looks like a dashed circle with a cross through it. And that's very useful because you can move it around with the left mouse button. Whenever you click on the scene, it moves. Give it a try. And not only can you put it where you want it, you can also snap it to things. So you can snap it to the center and put an object in the center. You can snap an object to it. It's just a very useful tool and something worth remembering. A lot of beginner users of Blender forget the 3D cursor and they spend ages tiddling around trying to bring something exactly into the center or exactly in line with something else. And the 3D cursor could have done it for them inside a few seconds. So there we go. That basically is the default scene. So you have a go now at moving stuff around, moving around the scene rather, and moving the cursor around, and then come back here. Great, you're back. To show you how the cursor works, we'll just add a sphere and you can see it's popped in where the cursor is. Now, what I can do is I'll move the sphere away from the cursor. Now what I can do is hit undo to get rid of the sphere, which is Control Z. And we'll move the cube about. Like so. And as you can see now, we've moved the cube well away from the center in all directions. Now let's suppose we want to get it back. What we do is go down to the object menu, hit snap and cursor to center. So the cursor now jumps to the center. And then what we do is we go back to the object menu again, snap again, and this time it's selection to cursor, and what we've got selected goes to the cursor. And that's basically one of the ways of lining objects up with other objects and lining objects up with the grid. So if we go back again, we'll add in a UV sphere again. This time, because the cursor was in the box, the sphere was in the box. And we're moving things by clicking on those arrows. You see, you've got the blue, the red and the green arrows. And we're just using those to drag it about. So now what we can do is we snap the cursor to the sphere and we can select the box and snap the box onto the cursor and then move the box away, and then we know that that box is exactly lined up with that sphere. And we can put everything back again just by pressing Ctrl Z a few times, which is undo. And that undoes 32 actions and it's very, very useful. You do something wrong, you hit Ctrl Z a few times and you're back where you started. As you can see, there is now no sphere inside the box and there is nothing up my sleeve. Go away and have a bit of a play with that. Try moving things around, try using the 3D cursor. Scene. And by floor I don't mean there's something wrong with it. What I mean is something that you stand on, as in a floor. And looking from the camera point of view, whenever you do a floor, you need to look at it from the camera point of view, because one of the best things to do is to set that up now. So by clicking on where you've got the camera and the thing, at the top right, and you get this render settings, and there's loads of different render settings you can use. I'm just going to set it to HD TV 720 pixels as I've just done, and that sets up the window. Now you might think that the easiest way to make that floor fill up the whole space was to scale it. So there we go, we'll scale it up. and we're using the grab handles again, and there you go. That just about fills the screen. But if we look at the top, whoa, you can see we've got a huge area. Now Blender will attempt to render all of that even though it's not in the scene, and it needs to do that because of things like shadows and reflections. Now we know, well I know, that we're not going to need it in this case, so in order to make the rendering an awful lot faster, we're actually going to restrict that area to what we can see from the camera. And that implies editing that object so it's no longer a square and making it a funny shape. So that's what we'll do now. I'm just going to scale it down so I can see all four points of it again. So I've got something to grab hold of when I edit it. And we'll go in a minute from what they call object mode. In the middle there, we're going to select edit mode. So that's about right. So here we go. Right, it's now in edit mode. We're automatically already set up to select the vertexes, which is the corners of things. That's the default. So if you right click on a corner, you'll see it will light up in yellow. And you can do that to any of the 4 corners on this shape. So it's just a square. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the handles to pull those corners around until they're just outside the visible area. Now it's important that you only use the red and the green because they line up with the plane. If you use the blue, you don't want to do it because you're bending it upwards or downwards, and we don't want a bent floor, or do we? No, we don't. So just the reds and the greens, okay? And all you do is just take hold of each corner in turn, pull it until it's just outside the image, and remember only to use the reds and the greens, and then it will stay aligned with the ground and not scoot up into space somewhere. And this is one of the problems that beginners with 3D usually have. They find themselves adjusting stuff in all sorts of unexpected directions. So although there's other ways to move points around in Blender, for the moment, while you're learning, I'm going to suggest that you stick to the handles because they only move things in one direction at a time. So there we go. Now I want you to go away and do that and line up your plane with the camera view after you've set it to HD TV 720 pixels, and then come back here. Now you've done that, if you look at the top, you'll see you've got a much smaller area. Okay, it's a funny shape, but we don't care about that. It's going to be much quicker to render. Now, talking about rendering, you can see everything's murky, horrible grey at the moment. We'll go back to object mode, and if you go along where the camera was in there, in that little menu there, and you make sure that you've selected the plane, and we're going to rename that the floor, so I don't forget it's the floor. Brilliant. You can do that by right clicking on it and selecting rename in the list up there. And we go to material, which is like the round sort of knobbly thing in that menu. Add a new one. There's lots of different settings in materials, and you can fiddle around with them to your heart's content, but you won't really see what happens until you render something. So all the way through, when you're playing with materials, you happen to do test renders, and this particular thing that we're going to do here is we're actually going to set this as a texture. And I'm just making it orange, not because that's going to be the final colour and there's a test render of it, horrible, but because I want to see in the 3D view exactly what is what. so it's going to be a different colour from other things. Right, so now having set up a material, we're going to put a texture on there. And the best thing to do is to find a texture off the internet. Why not? So here we are, I'm going into Google Images, and I'm going to put in floor texture. Boing! Loads of floors. And we'll pick a nice one from that. We want to make sure it's large, so in the size down on the left here we'll pick large, because the larger the image we get is the better. And I like that one. I like floor stone. That looks nice. Let's just have a check, see if there's any others I like the look of. I'd love that if I was doing sort of like a scarred concrete floor. It would be brilliant. But no, we'll use that. We're going to use that floor stone there. So I don't like that one. That would be good. I mean, it does tile. For this particular one, I've got a feeling because it's quite a large area, we're going to need something that stacks up and tiles. So a lot of these wouldn't be any good because they wouldn't sort of go together, if you know what I mean, without a seam. You want a seamlessly tiling texture. I don't think that one would either. That one would, but it's a bit boring. That looks as if it will go. Yeah, it does look as if it will go. Okay, well, we'll use that one. So we'll wait a while for it to download because it is 2.4 megs, and we'll save the image into the file I always save these images in, which is simply called 3D. So, sorry, the folder. And remember, it's called Floorstone. And it's a good idea to have some sort of directory structure to put your 3D files in. Mine isn't very good at the moment, but hey, I'll work on my laptop a lot of the time. Right, now we go to the texture, which is the one with the little dots next to the material. I want new. We're going to set it not clouds, but image or movie. Open image. We'll find it on our hard drive, 3D directory, and it was called, can't remember what it's called. What is it called? Floorstone, that's it. There we go. And there's a view of both the material and the texture. Now what we want is it's the colour we want, and the geometry as well, the normal value we've ticked. As you see, that just warps the surface. I don't know if that's too low. Well, it looks alright in the preview. Maybe a bit more. Yeah, something like that. And I don't like the shine on it, so we'll go back to the material. We'll turn the specularity down further. Something like that, I think that'll do. And we'll do a quick test render, see what it looks like. Drop the hardness down. Something like that maybe. Yeah. Okay, quick test render, see what the floor looks like. And yes, I thought so. Because it tries to put the whole texture on now, so the whole of that square thing is covered in one texture image, then the stones are absolutely huge. We don't want them that big. So it makes our cube look tiny, and our cube we want to look a bit larger. So there's a number of different ways we can do this, but the way we're going to do it is not by changing what it says down there, mapping. It's a bit confusing because I've got mapping and image mapping, and mapping is all about how the texture is mapped to the actual item. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the extension to repeat, and set it to repeat 3 times in each axis, and yeah, that looks okay. That looks okay for a trial render. It's all a bit dark at the moment, So I think we need to turn the light up. You know, I haven't moved the light away from its default position. We can do that. Now we're going to change the type of the lamp here. We're going to change it to sun. There we go. And render the image again. Yeah, as you can see, that's brighter. The shadows are better. A bit too good actually. We'll come back to that later. Alright. I think maybe we need to turn that brightness down a bit, if anything. Now lamps you can play with an awful lot. As I said, I'm not going to do anything with that one. Now what we want to do is position the cube, which I'm just doing. And I'm going to scale it. Now I could scale it using the handles there, but I want to keep it in proportion, so what I'm going to do is hit the S key, and when you hit S and you're in object mode, you see you get this line, and by moving backwards and forwards along the line you can make it bigger and smaller. Now change the handles to the manoeuvring ones, and I'm going to move it about it's about a place that it looks right. It's about there. And now I'm changing to the rotation handles, because what I want the cube to do is kind of spin around on a point. If you remember what it was doing. So there we go. I've got it 1 point down, and I want it so that around about 60 frames in or so there's a face that comes around and faces the camera, and that will be that one at the top left there. Yeah, that looks like about right. And this is the start position of our cube. Mind you, I think I'm going to drop it down so that it touches the floor, and then as it spins it can rise up a bit, just to add a bit of extra dramatic effect there. Now the way animation works in Blender is by adding keyframes. And you have an object selected, you move it to where you want it to be, on the keyframe that you want it to be, which at the moment, if you look at the bottom of the screen, there's a strip, and we're at the left hand side of it, which is frame 0, which is the start position. Sorry, frame 1, and I want this to be about a 5-second animation. Since we've got 25 frames per second, that's 125 frames, so I'll just set the end to 125 frames by clicking and dragging where it says end 125. Now I'm going to move the cube down. As you can see, it's going through the floor. Now I don't want that, so I'm going to put it just above, somewhere there. Okay. And then we'll go over to where it says keyframes at the left. As you can see, it says transform, object, shading, keyframes. We'll insert. I'm going to insert location and rotation keyframe. Lock rots. Okay. It's because we want it to remember both the location and the rotation. Now we're going to go to the end. Now, as you can see, you can go past the end by using the little buttons on the playback thingy. You can get it to skip to the end, which is a lot more accurate. And we're going to go click on the box on that menu we used previously at the top right, and you get these rotation values and location values, and we want to going to put in 365, so it's going to do slightly more than a complete rotation, but it won't ever get to do that. You'll see what I mean later. And we're also going to lift it up off the floor, but not too far. We don't want it disappearing. I'm going to insert lock rot again. And now if you grab hold of the green line with your mouse and whiz it backwards and forwards, you'll see it rotate and jump up and down like so. And somewhere around about sort of there-ish, we're going to make the whole thing explode, and somewhere in between there and the beginning we're going to make it show whatever picture we want it to show. In the case of this animation, it's my horrible mug. You can put whatever you like in yours, and I'll show you how to do that later on. Now we're going to click on the cube, we're going to give it a material, and I'm going to make it reflect a lot and be very hard, because I'm going to turn it into a mirror. Okay, so we'll check where it says mirror, turn the reflectivity right the way up because it's a mirror, maybe not quite all the way up, and we'll change the colour just underneath by clicking on it and make it slightly blue. That way reflections won't be quite the same colour as the things that are there, and it'll be obvious that it's a mirror. A test render shows us what's happening. Now you can see that the two top faces are still a horrible grey colour, and we'll fix that in a jiffy in the next section of the tutorial. So your job now is to go over what I've just done, do the animation and get it to look something like this.